Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Sovereign skies over Europe are increasingly breached by drones, cheap, covert and hard to trace. These incursions are testing NATO's defences and redefining the rules of engagement. What we're witnessing is hybrid warfare by stealth, not declaration. Joining us today on TVP World to examine this shift is Diane Francis, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, whose latest work warns that the alliance may already be failing the test. Diane, welcome back to TVP World and thank you for taking the time.
Fine, thank you.
So let's start with that word that you use in your newsletter. You say that NATO's reaction is a fail. What should have been done differently?
Well, I think that it's very important to understand that, he is testing the limits, and it's an attempt to disrupt and create chaos inside the NATO alliance. We've talked about this before. When a drone or aircraft enters the airspace of any NATO member or the sea lanes, they should be warned to leave immediately or blown out of the sky or out of the water. This kind of tolerance has led to even more of this, and now it's very widespread. And you've got drones, you've got lines being cut under sea. Recently, they hacked a dam in Norway and tried to flood part of the country by opening up its gates. They sabotaged the GPS on a couple of airplanes carrying NATO officials and other officials. He's just testing it. And in actual fact, to me, it's not war. Predictions of a war in Europe are irrelevant now. I think we are in a gray zone war, and NATO has to react more toughly and strongly than it has in the past.
Is it not time to redefine our terms, Diane? I mean, you talk about a grey zone war. It is an actual war. It's just not using guns and bullets in the traditional way. It's not a kinetic war, but there is a conflict between Russia and NATO countries. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And he would argue, Putin would argue, that because NATO members in the United States have been shipping arms, military, and other aid to Ukraine, which is fighting them, that they're indirectly causing war. And now that Ukraine is taking their defense into Russia, I think that's why we've gotten this response, among other things. So what you have is Ukraine in the middle. You have Russia attacking the people helping Ukraine. And now the people helping Ukraine are helping Ukraine attack the Russians. And so it is spreading, and it's very concerning. And I think that something has to be done very quickly to counteract it so that it doesn't get even more serious.
Well, you use the word sleepwalking. Europe is sleepwalking into war. What exactly do you mean by that, Diane?
What I mean by sleepwalking is it's nothing that Europe has done except help Ukraine, and it has every right in the world to help Ukraine, and has every right in the world to invite Ukraine to join NATO. However, the sleepwalking part is I don't see conscription in European countries. I don't see troops being deployed to the Eastern Front. I do not see declarations of anything that look like there's any kind of military or militarization escalation on the part of Europe or NATO for that matter. And they can't just allow him to chip away and then, oops, he hits a major city and now we're in a war. There has to be more preparation for this, and there has to be complete protection of the skies. The other thing that he's doing now, it looks like, with probably the help of the Chinese, is he's fooling around with satellites, so that a lot of the intelligence used by militaries, by aviation, by aircraft, by seagoing vessels is now getting disrupted. I mean, he's just chipping away at the edges, and it's a form of war.
Understood. Now, coming to the other side of the coin, and that is defence against these. And let's take drones as the example. Around 20 drones entered Polish airspace. Not all of them were intercepted. How well is NATO, and the eastern flank of NATO in particular, doing in terms of its defence against drone attacks?
Well, it isn't doing anything because it didn't expect it, and that's what he's doing. He is putting pressure on NATO to stop the war in Ukraine because the Ukrainians are doing better than the Russians are doing, and the Americans are there too, also helping. This is a form of pressure tactic to get everybody to say, okay, now let's stop it. Let's stop all of it altogether. That's my take on it. It's also designed to generate anxiety amongst the European members and to hurt certain leaders in Europe. But Germany's chancellor recently said we're not at war, but we're not in peace either. Well, that kind of parsing of the definition has to be thrown out the window. Europe has been attacked by Russia through all kinds of means. It is a war against Europe too now. I say it has started, and certain things have to take place very, very, very quickly.
Hello? Can you hear me, Diane?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Okay, you're back. Great. Now, I want to move on. We're talking about a response to these provocations, in particular, Article 4. Now, that has been invoked by Estonia and by Poland. And basically it says that we need discussions on the NATO response to the incursions of drones and fighter aircraft into those countries' airspaces. Does Article 4 have any teeth? What's the result of those discussions?
I think Article 4 is just a consultation. I would have guessed that what Poland and Estonia are both saying is that, look, we're going to shoot down their aircraft, and I hope you back us because they've attacked us first, and we're a NATO member. So while we don't want to invoke the whole Charter 5, remember Turkey did this. Turkey shot down Russian jets around Syria around the Syrian war. And they shot them down. They warned them 3 times to go, 2 jets, 2 expensive MiG jets, and they shot them down, and the pilots were killed. And Russia didn't retaliate, didn't do anything else. And I think that Turkey, probably invoked Chapter 4 and said, they're over our skies, we're going to shoot them down. And, nobody's was going to stop Turkey from doing that. So I think that this has to be in place for all of the countries, and that, Russia has to be told publicly, you keep doing this stuff. The next one, we're going to shoot down the drone, the submarine, the satellite, the jet, whatever you're doing, and to stop this has got to stop. It's an attack.
Yeah, if we zoom out for a second, Diane, we see all the aggressiveness that Putin is demonstrating, and we see a very soft response from NATO. Where does it go to next? I mean, is he going to keep pushing? And if so, how?
Well, he's going to keep pushing until he has some jets shot down, and then he's going to make a lot of noise about dropping a nuclear bomb somewhere, and then it'll just fade away. This is testing, in my opinion. If he wanted to unleash everything, he would. Now, he's got other pressure points that he's going to be using. And, we already know that immediately after the invasion, he seized 2 nuclear reactors, one in Zaporizhia and the old Chernobyl reactor. And he's had troops there. And the dereliction of power supply to those 2 plants are being fiddled around with and concerning international nuclear people. If either of those plants Chernobyl's already melted down, but if the dome were taken off or somehow the radioactivity could escape, it would poison vast sectors of not just Ukraine but Europe. And Zaporizhia the plume of radiation could possibly go to Russia, even depends on the wind blowing, but it certainly would go toward the Baltics and Poland. So he's playing around with all this stuff, and he's got to be finally called short on it, and something has to be done, in my opinion, because I don't think he wants full-scale war. Now, the other thing, too, is that Europe is very complicated. There's a lot of countries, and some people don't care about the war as much as others. Some don't have military, some do. Imagine, just for 1 minute, if Russia or China unleashed a couple of dozen drones that exploded over the US and hit things in the United States, what the response would be. And that's the way that Europe should be thinking.
Right. Now, you talked about, Putin threatening a nuclear response. How big a threat is the tactical nuclear weapon that he's been kind of mentioning from time to time? For example, one based in Belarus.
This, again, is a scare tactic. But, let's not forget, too, that if Europe continues to recoil and retreat from pushing back in any really meaningful way, and certainly militarily, he's going to keep applying the pressure. And he's, in the meantime, moving troops close to the European, but the NATO borders. He's moving all kinds of missile silos there. He says, you said, in Belarus has tactical nuclear weapons. He's not going to start a nuclear war. He doesn't have to. He can just keep chipping away, demoralizing, harming, and upsetting and making Europeans anxious. And they're still not reacting the way I think they should, or certainly the way the United States would, had its airspace been invaded by a MiG or Russian drones.
Right. Well, of course, all you hear and have been hearing since the full-scale invasion is that the West and Europe in particular is terrified of escalation. Well, escalation is happening, irrespective of what the West is doing, which is not very much. So, if you were in charge of NATO's strategy, what would you recommend? What would you suggest?
Well, I'm not, but and this is not to say that it isn't already going on in private conversations. You've got a lot of people, and the problem with NATO and the European Union is unanimity is required. You've got a skunk at the picnic called Hungary that's preventing any kind of thing that NATO may propose to do that would escalate, and the European Union as well. And so those kinds of problems have to be sorted out. But as this continues, as more and more of this continues, I think that the NATO members have to say, point blank, any attack will be met with an equivalent attack inside Russia.
Right.
Or on our lands, if they're on our lands. And they just have to do that, and just like Turkey did it, and it was not a problem.
Yes, and I think many would agree with you, and the sooner the better. Diane Francis, thank you so much, as always, for sharing your analysis with our audience. Have a good day.
You too. You're welcome.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, though. Lots more coming up. Goodbye.